We'll just thank you for coming to the workshop. There might be one or two people still to come in, but I think people are either networking or they've gone to the other one. So this is us, and thanks very, very much for coming. It's quite nice to have quite a small group, I think, because we're going to ask you questions during this workshop as well, and we'd really like your feedback on things. So Agnes is handing out leaflets like an usherette there. Yeah. So I'll introduce myself. First, I'm Paul Thomas, and I'm the, as you can see, the Deep Co-ordinator for the north of the UK. So my modest patch runs from a vague line between, say, Crewe and Hull up to the Shetland Islands and across to Northern Ireland. And there's a rumour that the Republic of Ireland want to join the Deep network as well. And I have a colleague that works in the south of England and Wales, Rachel herself. That's how you can contact us. And we're funded by the Life Changes Trust in Scotland, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and Comic Relief. And the Deep Network is part of Innovations in Dementia, which is there's 6 of us in the company, and it's a community interest company that facilitates the Deep Network. Has everybody heard of Deep? Is there anybody here that's never heard of Deep before? Not until today. Okay. How are we doing? Okay. Well, the Deep Network is in phase 3 of Deep now. It started in 2012, and that's where myself and Rachel, the coordinator, came in, somebody to give it a bit more substance and to link groups together. Deep is a network of groups and individuals who live with a diagnosis of dementia. And the objective of the Deep Network is to help give people that voice so that they can influence change positively. And it's my great privilege to have met in my 10 months in that post some really fantastic people, including Agnes, who's supposed to be up here, but she's not yet, and many other people who live with dementia and are making a really fantastic difference to the landscape of dementia care and understanding in the UK and further afield. So I'm going to hand over to Agnes now, who's going to tell you a little bit about herself. Okay.
Hi there.
Agnes,
take a wee
who's from
seat.
MBE.
So yeah, there's a wee book for you. And that's the last of them, I think.
Okay.
I think my daughter has taken the rest of them, and she's a traitor. If you've seen my daughter, she's not here. She's got my iPad, and she's in the other workshop.
She's in the other workshop?
Yes.
Yeah.
Peter, you'll need to get on to it. Thank you all for coming here today. And I don't know what this is. When Paul said to say a little bit about myself, you know, I forget. But it's not the biggest thing. But when someone says, tell me a wee bit about yourself, my mind goes totally blank. And for the life of me, I think, sugar, I don't know, you know. And I ramble on. But I'm Agnes. Before I was diagnosed, I was a nurse. I worked in accident and emergency. And I also cared for my dad. And the last thing I ever thought was I was going to get a diagnosis of dementia. And I was the last one to even think that I had dementia. So when they were having issues and getting people to help me, I was quite annoyed because I thought it was everybody else's fault and not mine. And the doctor that I worked with, I thought he was going through the male menopause. They were talking about me having the menopause. I was quite sure it was the doctor that had the male menopause. But anyway, needless to say, I got a diagnosis of dementia of the Alzheimer's type at the age of 57. And my life changed after that. Because after my diagnosis, I could no longer care for my dad because I didn't think I had capacity. I went to bed one day, able to care and manage and various things, and then all of a sudden was given a diagnosis, and my whole life and the way people looked at me changed. And I wouldn't say I went into a depression, but I certainly went into a shell. And my head went down, and I wasn't the proactive person that I was in my work. And at the same time, my words, I was fumbling for my words, etc. And atypical of what you hear of people with dementia. But when it started to affect my senses, wow, that was the worst thing that ever happened to me. When I started, I could no longer trust my eyes. And I didn't know what I was seeing. I didn't know. I had no knowledge of what was happening. And then I got bumped with a car crossing the road. And I couldn't understand it because by this time I was very careful. And I was on a zebra crossing. And I thought, I can't put up with this any longer. We need to do something. Now, I was very fortunate, very, very fortunate, because I had got introduced to the working group, which was the first campaigning group in Scotland and still going strong now. They loved me better. They taught me to accept my words. And if I got them mixed up, hey-ho, that's just laugh it off. And just accept myself for what I was. But to be part of the working group, I had to campaign because it's not a self-help group, it's a campaigning group. And so I ended up doing things like this just because there was no deep network. There were no other groups. It was the only game in town in Scotland was the working group. So if I wanted help, I had to join it. So that was it. But with the sensory issues, I realised very quickly when I was at conferences, and we were at it this morning, everybody talks about cognitive and about medical, but very few people go into the sensory, and very few professionals are actually looking at optometrists, audiologists, and saying, how can you help people with dementia? It's not just about staying in the dementia world. So I decided that I was going to take dementia into the optometrists and ophthalmology and audiology and psychology with Reinhard, and I gatecrashed everywhere and anywhere and ended up bringing dementia into their world. But that wasn't enough because there was still no help for us. And I was still covered in bruises, and I was still listening to other people with dementia talking about how they can manage their memory with the help of their friends and dementia-friendly societies and various things, and their carers, and their best pal, who you say, help me, you know, who's that? But nobody could make your eyes see, and nobody could help me with my other senses. So 2 years ago at a conference similar to this, only in Glasgow, there were 50 people with dementia, all complaining about their senses. And I don't do complaints. I listened for so long. I'm an action person. That's why I liked Angela Rippon. As soon as she said, I'll take action, I thought, you're my girl. I want action. Have a wee seat? No, it's okay. So anyway, what I done was I found money at this conference. I said to them, have a seat. It's okay. And at this conference, what I said was, if I find a wee pot of money, and it will be a wee pot of money, will you tell your stories, your lived experience? And we'll do it from grassroots up. And some of you have got the booklet. This booklet went wild. There's 40,000 circulating around the world. It's only been going 18 months to 2 years. It's been transcribed into 4 different languages. And everybody's celebrating it as a success. Not me. It's not a success if it's not helping people at the grassroots. And all it done was help people, architects use it in training and people using it in training. But it didn't make any difference. It hasn't got my needs met or anybody else that I knew. So it was suggested when I was complaining bitterly that I go for a Churchill fellow. And if the professionals wouldn't do it yourself, Agnes. And I thought, yeah, I'll do that. And that's what I done. And never thinking I would get it, but I got a Churchill fellow. And out of that Churchill fellow, I am going to create a United Kingdom dementia sensory pathway. I'm not going to do it on my own. I mean, I'm a wee lassie for Coatbridge, for God's sake. There's no way I'm going to be able to do that. I'm going to get ophthalmologists, audiologists, all the top people to put their bit in. But at the heart of it is going to be the people with dementia and their carers. And that is going to be the most important thing. It's our needs that are going to get met this time. And I am determined that is going to happen. And it's not going to be Scottish. It's going to be United Kingdom. I went to Canada as part of that. Did I see much of Canada? No.
No.
I done 4 meetings a day. I was at universities, ophthalmologists, you name it. I was there, care homes. I was there trying to exchange knowledge. And it's about exchanging knowledge. It's not about me giving you. I'm wanting you to help me to make a difference for the whole. And that's what it was. So that's where we are at the moment. So watch this space. There's going to be a United Kingdom Dementia Sensory. No wonder my daughter's not here because she's to her knees. Every time I speak, I give her more work to do. So yes, that is in essence, but we don't do it on our own. People with dementia, we want help. We are not incapable. When we get a diagnosis, we don't waking up the next day and be incapable. We've still stuff we can give. We just need a little help to be able to get the best out. And that's why I like the Deep, because they helped and they're networking. And that's why I know so many people with dementia all over the world. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to our workshop, and that's us now, isn't it? Are we finished?
I think so. I can't remember a thing. I have no clue. My daughter's got all my notes and everything.
We decided to call the workshop today From the Inside Out, and that's because it's about the voice of experience of dementia. And I'm drawn to a quote that came to us at a recent workshop that we held in the south of Scotland. And another gentleman, the guy who wrote the driving booklet, if anybody picked that up,
Yeah.
James McKillop, he started off his contribution by saying that some people feel that dementia is the end of the world, but he actually enjoys his life. And James has had a diagnosis for 19 years now. And so it just shows that the landscape's changing. And I think that's really, really important. If we listen to people and give people the time to express themselves and explain what the experience of dementia is, remarkable things happen. From the Inside Out also relates to a workshop I went to in Brighton last year at Dementia Congress, and there was a presentation on a piece of work where there'd been research done on training nursing staff on person-centred care and human rights. And then they did a survey of the people that had been cared for by this staff and found that it made no difference at all to the people that were receiving the care. And they wondered why this was. But Tommy Dunn, another person that you will know very well, his contribution to that workshop was, you started in the wrong place. You should have asked us what would make a difference. And that really made an impact on me. And that's why I wanted to call it From the Inside Out, because that's the phrase he used. You start from the inside out, not from the outside in. And I think that was quite ably described in one of the workshops earlier. Where do care strategies and health care meet with life management? Where do those two things meet together? But at least that's being said now, isn't it? So it brings the two things together. I'm just going to put some quotes up there that people have given us over the past, or during my 10 months and previously as well, that just strike a chord. There could be so many up there. I want to see a world that accepts dementia. And remember, these are people that live with dementia and are living with dementia. That was a person it was the first meeting she'd ever been to. The first time she'd ever been to a collective meeting. That was what she wrote up there. When I got my diagnosis, I was told immediately by the GP not to drive again. That meant I couldn't take part in my community and I couldn't be a granny anymore. She couldn't drive to see her kids and her grandchildren couldn't get there. So that made a really big impact on that person's life. Much more of an impact than the diagnosis of dementia. Yep, it's a real life issue. And then being told that you have dementia isn't enough. They wouldn't tell you that you've got cancer and then just send you away. And I think somebody that's here now alluded to that kind of thing earlier in one of the discussions we had in there. But so many people have been told that they have dementia, whether that's through the GP diagnosis or whatever. That's a big impact. So there was nothing specific there, and it relates to some of the topics that were discussed there. Does anybody have any comment on any of those quotes? Any initial reactions? Yes, Peter.
My name's Peter Mittler. You've heard me before on human rights. I'm not going to talk about human rights now.
We are.
To this, right? But I'm going to say the first statement is a common one, and some clinicians ask for the newly diagnosed person to hand over their driving license there and then.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know how frequent this is, but if you look at Facebook and if you consult the members of Dementia Alliance International and the UK members, this is not an isolated example. James McKillop is entirely original about this because he's written a whole booklet about this, which you probably won't talk about, so I'll say no more.
Well,
James McKillop is a remarkable individual. So he was told not to drive again. I don't know whether he was asked to hand over his license, but if he had been, the clinician who did it would be breaking the law. He has no right under UK law to ask anyone to surrender their license. When I got my diagnosis, and I'll say now I got it from Alistair Burns, it was exemplary 10 years ago.
yeah.
He said, you know you have to tell the driving license authority. And I said, no, I realise that. So every year I get a form. I'm 87. I would need to be renewed every 3 years anyway. But now I have to be renewed once a year. I don't mind at all. What I object to is the procedure.
Yeah.
Professor Burns, as my psychiatrist and my GP, is asked to sign a form. And I'm asked to say if I can see at 30 yards. I say that I have the diagnosis that was given to me. I always write that in, but I say I'm still driving. Now I got to the stage. I've had health issues of another kind, and I really think I ought to have an independent driving test.
Yeah.
That is almost never suggested by the driving license authority. You are legally allowed to have it. If an independent assessment tells me, after watching me drive, taking me round, and I'm practicing like that, by the way, turning corners, etc., backing in the wrong way, and I'm not going to tell him I have Alzheimer's. I'm going to ask for a test as a person with 87 who jolly well ought.
Indeed.
I think everybody over 75.
You know, Pete, I'm going to tell. Sorry, I was going to tell.
In that sense, you see,
Your
that's
human
breaking
rights.
the law.
Yeah.
And of course, the second point is absolutely the message that Dementia Alliance is giving. What we want is we want what we call a post-diagnostic rehabilitation pathway. I'm not going to talk about that now. Don't
Okay.
worry about it.
Okay.
But just to stick to the driving, it has legal implications, and a lot of it doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
I've got a wee joke to tell you about the. Sorry, and then I'll ask. A wee joke to tell you about the driving license one. There's a gentleman, one of my mentors. I can't remember his name now, but anyway, he was asked when he was diagnosed to hand over his driving license, and just as what happened to James, that happened to Edward, and Edward was raging, and he went out and he got his mobile out and he phoned the RAF, you know, the flying people, and he phoned and he says, book me in, and he pulled out his, what is it, you drive a plane, his pilot license, and he said, they never asked for that.
Excellent.
And he had that for ages, and it goes to show you that they're trying to be safe. It's risk averse, isn't it? They're trying to do the best they can for you with the best will in the world, but they're breaking your human rights without knowing it. There was a lady at the back,
Yes.
I think, that wanted to...
Jean Fletcher, working with Oxford Health NHS Trust in an older adult community mental health centre. I just want to suggest for the first sentence, I would be happier to see, I want to see a world that accepts people with dementia
Yes.
rather than the dementia itself.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Please.
Excellent.
That's right.
Excellent.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
I'd say in
Tracy?
defence that these are direct quotes. That's yeah. Yes.
Tracy?
Hi. I was lucky because when I got my diagnosis, my
Yeah.
Dr. Dalby, who's my consultant, he didn't ask for my diagnosis, he didn't tell me I couldn't drive. He just suggested that
Good.
I would have to go for specialised driving
Assessment. Yeah.
And that was done by people who knew about dementia and that
Yes.
and was looked for, which I
Yes.
was quite happy to. But I've got PCA, I've got posterior cortical atrophy, and
Right.
actually what that does with my vision is it hides them. So I don't
Yeah.
always see people crossing the road, I don't see
Yeah.
a car coming in front of me, but I might not see it because my brain actually hides these things and all that, which is quite dangerous. So
Sure.
I said to at first I was not being told what to do, like most people do. So I thought I should go ahead and do this assessment. And then I went there, I said I can't do it because driving actually scares me because I don't see
Yeah.
what's there now because my brain hides it too much.
Yeah.
So then it was my choice to hand them the licence and told them DVA that I can't no longer drive.
That's brilliant.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And then I got the car, so I couldn't see the car and knowing I could be able to drive it.
That's great.
But that was my choice. So I was lucky that I'm in the area where I got my consultant
Thank you very much
And
indeed. That's
see-
great. We'll take two more comments.
Just before we go
Yeah.
there, again, I don't know any other condition where you would have such a tremendous loss and not get any kind of counselling or psychological intervention to come to terms and even assist you to give up your licence. You were
Yeah.
lucky and you were ready. You're thinking about it, Peter, but I know people that James McKillop, who wrote that, is still traumatised by giving up his licence.
He's done some good racing driving though on an airfield, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Which is great. Yes, sir.
I think Sheila Jolly, I manage a care home.
Oh right. Hi.
I think the problem for a lot of people with being told you've got dementia is dementia is such a wide
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it presents
That's the
itself
third one. Yeah.
in so many different
Yes.
some do say it's like 150
Yeah.
types
Yeah,
of
about
dementia,
200,
and that's
yeah.
only what they've got named.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think in some ways that's the trouble whenever you compare it to something like a cancer diagnosis. Cancer diagnosis is something that people know that's a symptom, it can be treated aggressively, passively.
Yeah.
Now, dementia is because the holistic.
It's an overall word, isn't it, that covers a whole. Yeah.
You've got the comorbidity that comes with it, you've
Sure.
got all the other things. I think,
Yeah.
so I can understand sometimes why people don't know how to direct or what to direct because
Of course.
you could say, well, it might be really good news. Somebody goes and reads that up
Of course.
and they've been sent down the wrong pathway. So I think
Well, these are the dangers in it, indeed. Yes.
yeah, I think
Okay.
that's why in a way, well, GPs get a bit of a bad
Yes.
press around
Of course.
it.
I think it's interesting that people raise that perception, though. Yes. Madam.
She's more or less said what I was going to
Okay.
say. On the last one, that if you diagnosed with cancer, then immediately they can offer you radium
Yes.
and chemo,
Yes.
and they don't know what they can offer you.
Yes.
with the
Yes. But having met people who've only been told they have dementia, so they don't know, so they might be saying, well, why can't I have Aristotle? But they've got perhaps a vascular dementia. So,
I
okay.
think too, sorry, I think to answer that is a lot of GPs say that. I don't want to diagnose people because there's nothing we can do, and that's not true. There is
Yeah.
things, they cannot cure it, but then there's a lot of cancers they can't cure, but there's still things that you can do.
You can reduce
And-
blood pressure with blood pressure medication. for
And
example.
you can also help people to live as well as they can. You can help people to be able to understand what's the underlying issues and to get to know their type of dementia. Again, because I think it's about 200 different types of dementia, and I think they're still counting, there's that rare. But how many different types of cancers, and everybody who has cancer thinks their cancer is the most important, and why wouldn't they? Because it's theirs. So yes, there is things you can do. It's just we need the GPs, we need the care home staff, we need the people that are supporting us to understand that just a listening ear, just to hear and say, I understand, I validate what you're feeling. Maybe if we get someone else to come in that can assist you, let's look at it in a different way. That's how we help, in a holistic way, and it goes for care homes too.
I'm going to move on because I want to get through. Yeah. Somebody else has said that Deep doesn't try to tell us about dementia, which is probably a difference. Deep listens to what we want to say, and as a network, as a UK network, everybody gets a bite of the cherry of what's going around the Deep network, which is an important piece. And there's an illustration of some people that we were together with, including Agnes, not so long ago. And something I noticed in some of the workshops, laughter and fun really loosens up communication. As you can see, everybody's having a pretty good time there.
And I think too, one of the very, very important things is that to create a safe space for that to happen, to bring a group of people like that who most of them hadn't met, I knew about 3 or 4 of them, I think, together from different parts of Scotland, and they came via, what was it, trains and
I've got that coming up. Got that coming up.
Things. But to create that safe space so that people felt safe. And there was one lady there, and she didn't talk very much. And after the end of the first day, she was talking and getting her voice heard. And some of it was so profound. And it just brought tears to my eyes, and it was so important to create that space, to get the voice that's less able to be heard, and that's what I liked about that.
Okay, just very quickly run through. We've got over 100 groups in the UK now, across all parts of the UK. There are lots of guides available on the website as well that are written by people living with dementia that express the way to hold a meeting, the way to consult, the way to talk to people, the way to design a website, etc. There are about 25 guides now downloadable from the website. There are publications which have all gone off the table, which has been very interesting this morning. We've hung on to 1 or 2, again written principally by people living with dementia. We have a rural network developing across the UK, which is not about where you live, it's about rural issues, because you can live in the middle of London, but your mum lives in rural Kent, for example. So there's a rural issue for all of us, but looking at those issues in particular. There are lots of videos on the website as well. There's a couple of workshops about women in dementia and activism there as well.
And can I just say as well, if you're sitting there and thinking this is nothing to do with me, I work in a care home, it's a very small home, the people I support, they're not into that. Can I tell you that part of the Deep groups, we have choirs, and all they do is sing and laugh. And it doesn't need to be just people with dementia that's a Deep network group. It can be carers and care staff and friends, and you just you just contact the Deep network and say this is what you want to do. You want to be part of the network. Why would you want to be part of a network? Well, you would get to hear what's going on. You would get to hear what other care homes and what other people have decided their community wants to do, because it comes from them. And also they have some grants. Not a lot of grants, but a little grant. So if you wanted to do a tea or a something, you can do that as well. That lady there.
Yes, sir.
One of the things I find is the isolation for men with dementia.
Yes. Yeah.
Mentions.
Yeah.
They sit in their rooms.
Yeah.
Can't get them to come here, can't get automatically in.
Yes.
And that would be a really interesting bit of
Yeah.
work.
Absolutely. I think that.
I think partly because the women congregate in the lounge, and they all have an atom with it, and
Yeah.
they just go straight way back to their rooms.
Yeah.
And that's what we offer, and we try. And it does worry me a lot, because I think that's their mental health for them.
That's one of the striking things, I think, isn't it? That, you know, I'm quite a private person. I live in the middle of nowhere, but if I had to go into a care home, I'd suddenly have to go into a communal living phase. So it's one of the real difficulties about working from a care home model, you could say, isn't it? Yes, sir. Sorry.
I was just going to add to that, I'm sure people will know, but in Newcastle they have an initiative with hens.
Yes.
With care homes. It's run by a charity.
Yes.
And it's completely taken off. And that, I think the initial thoughts behind that were it was for the men because men were happy with hens.
Yeah.
Some are, some
Yeah.
obviously aren't.
And music
Women are
listening
happy as well.
sessions and stuff.
But
Yeah.
because there's lots of things that I think women are perhaps happy to do in groups, but men they felt that the chickens would help, and it really did. But can I make a
Yes.
question as well? I see
Yeah.
on there you've got hearing and hallucinations,
Yeah.
seeing,
Mhm.
touch. But for me, I've never actually heard anyone talk about what it's like if you've got dementia with smell and taste. Is
Have
it
you not?
Okay.
Yes, well, Pete and I were just talking about that. Funnily enough, my dementia now, as I say, has started to affect my senses. And the recent one has been the change in taste. And I didn't understand what was going on. Now, we would think for medical people and people in the nursing, oh, it's the aging ear, it's the aging eye, it's the aging tongue, this is the aging process. Well, no, it's not. What happened with me and my consultant said is that my brain no longer can distinguish and tell what the tastes are, but it's not all tastes. Yeah. So what happened, first of all, is I'm a coffeeholic, and you'll see this in the book. You'll hear lots of people talking about taste in the book. So I love coffee, and I carried coffee everywhere. Cold coffee. I would have had cold coffee here and just drunk it. And 2 years ago, I was having my morning cup of coffee, and I spat it out. Now, it wasn't, I thought, this doesn't, I automatically spat it out. It was like poison. I just spat it out. It was an automatic response. So I thought, oh, it's the coffee's off. So all the coffee went out, and I changed my coffee, and it kept happening. And I thought, what is going on here? And then it started with other foods, but favourite foods, you know, the to die for, your comfort foods. My consultant said that my brain is no longer able to distinguish, for some unknown reason, that taste, that food. But like a child, and I don't like comparing people with dementia like childlike, but if you're trying to get a new brain used to food that it's not used to, what do they do when they first taste it and the brain doesn't recognise it? Spits it out. And you try to tell them, well, can you imagine my daughter's face the first time I done that in the restaurant? And then called the chef over and proceeded to tell him his food was off, and the whole restaurant knew about it, until they explained to me that this is another change in my brain. Now, think about nursing homes. And I was a nurse, and well, I suppose I still am, but anyway, not practicing. But anyway, do you think of how many times I was guilty of saying it? That's the dementia, right? Their behaviour, not their brain. So now it's a behaviour. Well, yes, I suppose it's a reactive behaviour in a response to the brain. So it's not coming from the person. So that's where it's different. So we need to look at this and say, okay, they're spitting the food out. No amount of trying is going to get that.
And
so what can we do? And there is solutions that we can do.
And
I don't have time to deal with it, but there is solutions, and I'll speak to you later.
This
about
website address, this online address at the bottom here will take you to a half-hour video which Agnes produced, in which you interviewed 23 people about their sensory changes. And I would really urge you to go to that. This will be sent out, I think it's in the leaflet as well, isn't it? The references in the leaflet. Again, I'd really urge you, we don't have time to
But there
do
is
that.
solutions, so don't think it's the end of the world, because there is solutions.
I'll just
But I still
run
drink
through,
coffee.
because we want to ask people some questions here. So I'll just run quickly through some of the things that people living with dementia get involved with. There's an interesting debate now around people becoming co-producers and co-researchers rather than research subjects in pieces of work about dementia, contributing to dementia-friendly communities directly from their experience, transport and service audits, and you can see the list down there. People from the Deep Network and other people living with dementia were part of the 2020 Challenge Task and Finish group that set out the original survey and designed that. They've just contributed substantially to the new Welsh dementia strategy. People sit on the Scottish cross-party dementia group, as we both go to that, don't we, as one or two other people do. We're going to take a bunch of people next time as well. We've decided that with Anna. And working with others, with those organisations, and adding value. So Deep adds value to and is led by the voices of people living with dementia. And people living with dementia want to and do make a very positive contribution and make a positive difference. And somebody said that people living with dementia can contribute and can change the world for everybody in the future. When we held these gatherings, just a little cartoon we put together there of how people travelled to these venues. They came by boat, they came by plane. There's a song in there, isn't there, from the 60s. They came by bus, they came by bicycle, they came by taxi, they came by train. I drove the furthest distance actually to Inverness there, and so and it shows the determination that people have to make a difference, but also the amount of organisation and support people need to get to these meetings, and it really involves the whole family and groups of people, getting people there. Another thing that just to highlight there is that sometimes creativity and fun and humour are the best way of oiling that communication. Not everybody wants to or receives post-diagnostic support for a whole number of reasons. There's a choice element in there. And just touching on the human rights thing, very, very important that we touched on earlier today. People have a right to say no. So there might be a prescribed pathway. We've all heard of the 5 pillars and the 8 pillars, but not everybody wants to or can fit into that pathway. And Agnes and her group, the alumni, with support of others, have started talking about, well, how do we self-manage in that period of time? If you've had a diagnosis like somebody we know for 19 years, you're left on your own to manage. How do you do that? Well, you do manage. So where does that expertise come from? And you've said that can feel like a black hole, and somebody else it can feel like a desert. So people with dementia have the same human rights as everybody else. And so we moved that debate on, didn't we, to actually the right to enjoy supported, independent living. And I wondered, do you want to say a bit more about that, Agnes? Because that's quite a quantum shift, isn't it, in where our debate's gone?
I think too that, I think it's there. How can people with dementia live in the community? We talk about dementia-friendly communities, and I live alone, and I'm destroying my daughter's life. She's had to give her work up, etc., to support me because I was in the black hole, getting no support whatsoever. So I wanted to say, where are the other people? And I spoke to people, and there's lots like me who live alone, who do not have support, who do not even require just gentle support, understanding. But then we looked at it, and at one of these gatherings, someone said to us, why are they saying that people with dementia self-manage? But anybody else with a long-term condition or living with a disability, they're getting supported to live with their disability, and it's their human right. And dementia is part of one of these long-term conditions. So why are we being excluded to getting supported living with dementia and to be able to live independently? Why? And these are the questions of throwing at you.
Take those little. That's fine. That's okay.
Why is it that just because it's dementia, suddenly you do not have that right to live independently? Now, I just recently get told, before I came here, that they thought I was doing too much, and maybe it was time that I stayed at home more. Well, I tell you, that person went with a flea in their ear, because I certainly told them about my human rights. And anyway, she's away to speak to her, supervisor about it. So anyway, but I mean, imagine coming into anybody's home and suggest. How would you feel if someone came into your home tomorrow and says, oh, by the way, I think you're doing too much, and I think maybe you should be staying in and maybe going out once a week, and we'll send someone and we'll take you.
And we reflect on how people with learning disabilities, for example, or people with physical disabilities now, they have the right to that personal assistant and independent living. So this is quite a shift for us in our thinking, rather than saying, tell us how to self-manage, give us a programme of care, deliver the services, saying, hang on a minute, there's a human right at stake here. If people with learning disabilities, physical disabilities, mental health problems, certainly where we live in Scotland, it's very well developed, that whole framework. Human rights is right at the top of the agenda. But it doesn't, as we've heard several times today, and it's really interesting, this is becoming a very powerful agenda, I think. It's not applied to people with living with dementia. And people are, as somebody said at one of our recent meetings, and people have said it before, my mum died in her mid-50s because she gave up. She was just put in a corner. Yep. So I just ask a question here. We've got 3 questions, a couple of questions to ask, and we've got, about 10 minutes left, haven't we? How can the right to supported independent living be respected? And if you come from and put into place for people, if you come from your own backgrounds there, any ideas? What can we do to change
Very
Uh,
that,
quickly,
Peter? Yes?
Follow the example of Scotland. Scotland
Okay.
is the only country in the world, the only government of the world, to have guaranteed 1 year of post-diagnostic support. In England, I keep asking, why cannot we do that? So get it into law that is. I know there are problems about delivering it, but it is not a commitment by just the Scottish government. It was a commitment made by the Scottish Parliament across all parties in 2009.
Yes, and not
That is a fantastic world leadership.
And not to go too much into the independence referendum debate, but the actual constitution of the Scottish Parliament is based on the Human Rights Act. So that all legislation it passes is so. Okay. Any other thoughts about how the right to supported independent living could be affected from where you come from? Anything? Yes.
I just wanted to ask a question about what that gentleman just said about that 1 year's free diagnosis.
Yes.
Yeah, post-diagnostic support.
What do you mean by post-diagnostic support?
It's a link worker provided by the Alzheimer's Scotland, are the main provider, not exclusively, and so it's a link worker who then visits the person in their own home, helps with a social care assessment, for example, points them in the direction of supportive services, gives medical advice in theory. Now, having said all that, only 2 in 5 people in Scotland actually get it. Yeah, even though it's a legal right because the resources aren't there to provide everybody with that
So that's the
support.
kind of support. So it's not support as in they're
That's
going
what I
to,
was asking.
they're not going to come in and help you cook or do anything like that.
Okay, so
Yes.
currently I work in Luton, I'm a commissioner. Currently anybody that goes through our memory assessment clinic automatically gets a follow-up visit from memory assessment, from the nurse dementia specialist. They can be referred to Alzheimer's, they get that post-diagnostic support.
Yes.
They get that ongoing, it's not just for a year.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that not the same thing?
It's
very similar, yeah.
Yes, it's very, very similar.
But it's probably
We are doing it in places.
Yeah, you are.
Yes.
In places it's happening in England. Yeah, in places. Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
We could extend that more to the
There is a lot of places where it is happening.
Of course.
It might not be causal based the same, or it might not be government led, but it's actually happening in a lot of places.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
There's
and
some
I
really
think-
good stuff happens in.
I think too, it's not to be post-diagnostic support. If you had your mum, and go back to that thing that gentleman, I think was it Alistair Burns from Scotland said, or someone, that said if it was your mum that was getting a diagnosis,
The mum test,
the mum's test, you would want your mum to get their rights met and they would to be able to be supported to live the way they want.
That's right.
I think that's what it is, the way they want.
Yeah.
So I bet, again, it's going back to the gentleman maybe in the care setting, and I think men are just awkward anyway, but never mind, racist.
Didn't marry an intelligent enough woman, Agnes.
But you know, they're very so they need to be handled slightly differently. But they have the right to be awkward. They have the right to want something different that's going to suit their needs.
And one of the questions.
How we find that is trying to say, what would you want? Or get them to help
Yeah.
do handyman stuff or
Yes.
something like that.
I'm from
Right.
One of the things that we really advocate is the use of advanced care planning.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm quite disappointed actually that it hasn't been touched on
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
Because we really see that as an empowering tool.
So-
Conversations,
absolutely.
Choices, preferences, priorities.
Totally.
And that happens at the post-diagnostic support.
Yeah.
But only,
Advice around. Yeah.
only in a, they don't immediately say, oh, come on, let's set your things in, because that would put people off. Do you know what I mean? But it evolves round and they gently get you through that. And in Scotland, they're very big on doing their advanced care. They call it
And
different
attorneyships,
things,
appointing attorneys.
yeah, and getting it set so that they know how to use it appropriately, and so that the person with the diagnosis and the carer are comfortable with it, and it's empowering rather than anything
I
else.
also
That's
thought
a big
that.
bit.
Sorry. I thought as well on the presentation from the Care Quality Commission
Yeah.
around care homes. There's also a right to a community life
Yes.
under the human right, and that's a right that gets taken away from people very often, not possibly deliberately, but circumstantially, because a person's put in a place of relative confinement. And so there are all sorts of ways that we can work around that, to have circles of support from the community. I know of a care home where they have a public hairdresser salon inside the care home, so anybody can come in and have their hair done, and students come in and work there, and they have a cafe that the public can use as well. So it's integrated into the community. So yes, I'm sorry.
That's right. My name's Yvonne. I work for a Ruth Centre, a community centre for the over 50s, and we see a lot of early onset dementia, and often we will speak to the next of kin, and of course denial is there all over the place. But for the people when they do get their diagnosis, why aren't health, housing and adult social care of every council getting involved to offer them their personal plan, to say to them, look, you might have been diagnosed now, but you might still be able to work and drive.
Totally.
And you know,
Totally.
carry on your life
I
for
think
the next 10,
you've touched on really important issues there.
let us know when you want.
That's right. And all those agencies being together in all sort of strategic meetings, but also involving people that actually experience whatever in this case dementia, but whatever the conditions might be, and contributing to that. I'm going to push it on now because time is getting on, and I see there's a timekeeper standing there.
All right.
I would also like to, I'd like to pass these round. If you could pass them along zigzag around. And hello, Angela.
I've come to tell you that you are running 10 minutes over and we're ready to start in the other room.
Oh, I'm sorry.
With 5 minutes, Angela. We need to finish this off.
All right.
Okay.
And then please, when Marty's ready,
My apologies, Angela.
We've got one little bit to do, Angela. Sorry. We've already really touched on this as well. Yeah. There as well. We've had a discussion around this question. Okay. Already, and we're being hurried along, so we'll go. We were asked earlier if there were any other issues that we think we should throw in, and that's, I think, spiritual care, spiritualism, our sense of another world. Okay. Can I ask you to put anything down that you think you can do to raise awareness of the voice of experience of living with dementia, the rights of people living with dementia, and the sensory challenges of people living with dementia from the service base or in your personal life? Pop it down on your post-it note and leave it up here, and we'll put those together. Yeah, anything that you think you can do, or give them to me later. Yeah, as we're passing around, and we'll send those out to everybody. We're straight over time, I recognise that. And just to finish, 2 quotes. Not everything has to die about me. You can keep it going if you're needed. And I think that's such a powerful statement as well from somebody. And as somebody else said, join us please in the journey of hopefulness. Thank you. Sorry we got pulled out of that.